Hi, I'm Renee Tucci, AIFD, and I'm coming to you on behalf of PHS to talk to you about dried floral design. So, what are some of the things you might need to create a dried floral design? Well, we'll start with the tools. You should always have a pair of clippers on hand. I like to have two pairs of clippers on hand. One is a thicker or a heftier pair that will cut through thick stems and branches. A second pair is for more fine cutting in case I'm working with small and delicate stems, which we're often working with in dried floral design. I also always like to have on hand a pair of wire cutters and a pair of scissors because you just never know when you're going to need those. Now, as far as the mechanics for how to put together a dried floral design, you can create a dried design using just about every method you would use for fresh flowers, with a few slight exceptions. So, for instance, this is clear tape. If you were working with very light and delicate stems, you could certainly do a tape grid, as you see in a lot of fresh floral designs. You could create a chicken wire pillow that will rest atop your vessel, and the stems could thread through that. You could also use a pin frog, which you'll see I have permanently cemented inside of this vessel here, and it's pins that you can actually impale stems into. So this works well for thicker stems and branches. And then, of course, we have the method that I'm going to be using today, which is the foam method. And I wanted to point out that there are two types of foam. We have fresh floral foam, which you would use for fresh flowers, and dry floral foam, which is used for faux botanical designs, permanent designs, and dried flower designs. And you can see there's a definite difference in color in these two foams and in the density or how they feel. So you want to make sure that you're using the correct foam. It's very common to accidentally grab the wrong one, and then it can really make your job a lot harder. So I'm going to be using my dried floral foam for this project. Now, when you're ready to start adding flowers to your design, of course, we have to first prepare our foam. So I'm going to take my foam and just hover it above my vessel and make a mark where I think I'll want to cut it, knowing I can always cut off more, but I can't add back on. So I'm gonna take my floral knife and just slice right through as much as I can. This knife doesn't fit all the way across, so I'll just do the same thing on the other side. And now I've got myself a block of Sahara or dry floral foam that I can start to work with. Now, as I wanted, it is a bit too big. So I'm going to take my knife and shave the corners. Okay, now we've got it just about right. You'll notice it's putting up a bit of a fight. I'm going to have to use a little bit of force to press it in. But that's actually what we want, because now it's being held in place by tension. It is not going to fall out. If you cut it a little loose where it's wiggling, you'll have to add additional mechanics such as a wedge inside to help your foam stay in place, or perhaps glue to the bottom of the foam to get it to stick to the container so that it doesn't fall off. We want to make sure we have sound mechanics. Now, I've purposely left my foam pretty flush to the top of the rim of the container. I know that my intended design is going to be mostly above the container. If I wanted anything to drip down, I would want to make sure to leave a stretch of foam that is lifted above the side of the container, and in that way I can angle my stems to have them drip down. Now, oftentimes you'll see designs that start with moss as a base when working with dried floral or permanent botanicals, and that's simply to help to hide the mechanics, also to add texture and color. There are lots of different types of moss. In particular here I have just a bit of dried Spanish moss, and I'm going to go ahead and lay that on here and just let it drip down a bit. If I was concerned about it falling off or moving, I could certainly use wires to pin it into place, but I'm just going to sort of set it there now because I know once I start adding flowers it's going to hold it right in place. Okay, now we are ready to start adding flowers, and I've selected my flowers based off of coordinating with our vessel here. So we've got a sweet little pitcher that has lemons and little light blue flowers and foliage on it. So we're going to select our flowers that coordinate with that, and we are going to start with our yellow yarrow. I'm starting with this because it's a very thick and sturdy stem, so I know that I can really work that in there very easily. I'm going to use my clippers just for speed's sake. I'm going to go ahead and line these all up, and using my clippers, I'm going to go ahead and cut them all at once so that I'm ready to add them in together. Okay, I've got my yarrow all clipped and ready to be added in. I'm creating a radial design for this pitcher, so I'm going to keep that in mind as I add my stems in, some on an angle and some straight up and down, to help create that rounded appearance as if it were spokes on a wheel or rays of the sun. So I'm not strictly just using the top of the foam. Where I can get to it, I'm also using the side of the foam to help really get a nice angle for my stems. And next up, I'm going to add in some of this dried hydrangea, and this is a beautiful pinnacle style hydrangea. It is very delicate and brittle, as most of our dried flowers are. They always have to be handled with a lot of care. They're not only brittle and will break, but they also create quite a mess in your work area. So keep that in mind as you're working with the dried flowers. So here we have another beautiful stem. And I'm going to add these throughout, in between the yarrow, to fill in. Okay, now I've added a base of my hydrangea. I've also set my pitcher on a Lazy Susan. I do like to work on a Susan just to keep things flowing a little faster. Now, the first two types of flowers I put in there had very strong and sturdy stems, so I was able to just anchor those right into the foam. The next flower I'm going to put in is a straw flower, and it's really beautiful, but the stems are very brittle. So what I'm actually going to do is use this pick machine to stabilize and secure the stems. So let me gather a few of my blooms here, maybe create a cluster or a grouping of the straw flower, so that I can pick them as one unit and add them in as one unit. I could, of course, pick them individually as well, so it really just depends on the look that you're trying to accomplish. Okay, so here I have a grouping of the straw flower. I'm going to pick that together. Now, what is a picking machine? Well, I should say, if you don't have a picking machine, there's an easy fix to this. This is a wood wired pick. Hopefully you can see that in the camera there. It's a 6-inch piece of wood. They come in all different sizes with a wire attached to it. So you could actually just take these stems, lay them parallel to the wood pick, take your wire, wrap it around the stems, and then trim the pick to length and help to add that into your design. But if you happen to have the pick machine handy, it looks like this. It's called a Floral stemming machine. Here we go, I'll spin it for the camera. And inside are these steel picks. They come in a box that looks like this. They're all different sizes. This particular size, my preferred size, is 2 1/8 inch picks. And when you take them out of the box, they come in these bunches like this, and basically you load the machine, and then as you work it, you'll pull the handle towards the front. That will load a pick into the feeder of the machine, and then lay your flower, whatever it is you want to pick, onto the pick itself, and then we're going to push the handle backwards. Gently, depending on your material, the pick pinching could actually break the stem, so you've got to gauge that. But then once you've done that, you've got a cluster of flowers that have been picked. They've got this steel pick on them, and then we've got all kinds of leverage with which to add the straw flower to the design. And that steel pick slides right through the foam. So I'm going to do that for a number of my straw flower groupings. Next up, we're going to add in our accent fillers. And I've got two different types I'm working with here. I'm going to start with this Limonium or Caspia, and this particular version has been preserved and color enhanced. So that means as it was drying, it was allowed to uptake some preservative and some color, and so it's got a bit more turquoise to it than the traditional natural purple tones, which go perfectly with the little blue flowers on our picture. Now, whenever you have something really small and brittle with dried flowers, I recommend hitting it with a little bit of Aquanet hairspray. It just sort of holds everything in place, particularly our small blooms. So just a little hit of that, let it dry, and it will help keep everything together. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pluck off some of these side shoots. Because these have been preserved and they're not just dried, the stems are a little hardier. But if I was having trouble kind of cutting through the mass of what I have in here already, I could certainly add a pick from our picking machine. Or I could do as I'm doing now, which is just simply adding those in to the foam all the way around, wherever I think I need a hint of that blue. Now we've got a bit of that blue color all the way around, which is really lovely. My last element that I'm going to put in this design is a bit of this natural gypsophilia or baby's breath. So it has some brown tones to it, which go really, really well, again, with the lemon tree branches that are on the picture. Now these stems, although this is, as I mentioned, a preserved version also, these stems are very thin. So I would recommend definitely running these through the pick machine. And I would also recommend doing several at a time, maybe 2 or 3 pieces at a time, simply for two reasons. Number one, just for speed so that you can fill in your areas a little faster. And number two, if your stem is too skinny, the picking machine won't bite into it. So you do need to have a little bit of dimension here for the pick machine to grab a hold of. So here we go. We've got a pick going through here. Oops. We had a machine malfunction. That happens sometimes. So I'll go ahead and feed another one in. There we go. Now we've got a beautiful pick covering our little gypsophilia cluster. And I'll go ahead and add this in all around as well. Okay, I'm pretty happy with our sweet little delicate design we made here. As with any good arrangement, you want to give it a spin and check it. Make sure your mechanics are all covered and you've got a really great design happening here. If you need to, you could go in and add more product to help finish up, cover your mechanics, or even a little bit more moss. If it's fitting, we certainly don't want to use moss or add moss just for moss's sake. You need to make sure that it sort of coordinates with your design. So that's it. Those are my tips and techniques on creating a dried flower design. I hope you all learned something, and I wish you the best of luck in creating your dried arrangements.